right. Good evening. Today is Tuesday, April 9th, and this is, we're starting off tonight with a presentation and public hearing on the proposed school budget. Turn it over to you, Joe.
Yes, so given the crowd we have here tonight, I thought we would just move to the document that's headed 2019-20 budget development process, which is the document we've been using all along and just adding on to it at every meeting that addresses the budget. And I think the last meeting, Tom, was the third draft, right? So if you go to the third page, where it says addition, about a third of the way down, it says additions to the third revenue draft budget at 4/9/19 BOE meeting. That's where we pick up from our last budget discussion. So Tom, I'm going to let you just go right through the list and explain what's there, why it's there. If board members have any questions about it, this would be a good time to ask those questions. So Tom, it's yours.
There's a couple different components of this, so some questions may get answered as we go along, because you might be kind of surprised a little bit by the additions we were able to add and where did that all come from. Let me explain it to you. So the first thing I want to talk about is we got our new state aid runs based on the budget that was approved on April 1st or whatever, and it produced just short of $12,000 more dollars. Most of that was in foundation aid, but there were some other changes too, and one of the things that got changed was our building aid. Our building aid got changed. So building aid changed. Building aid is also a big part of the tax cap, the calculation for that, and I'll get to that one because that created some more money. So we did receive more money in the basic formula, which is mostly foundation aid, but it's also building aid, transportation aid. There's a bunch of aids all rolled up into basic aid. Excess cost aid actually went down a little bit. Our BOCES aid went up a little bit, which was kind of nice to see, and our textbook, software, and library went up a little bit, so $11,857. So, but what I had to do though was, because there was a change in building aid, I went to the tax levy limit. Okay, so if we go to this document, okay,
And what's the number on it?
it's 6.2.2, or it should be in the second document that was, or maybe the third document.
Yeah, that's the old numbering.
This is, yeah, the old number, this one does it, so it's, should be in front of you. If you go through it, you'll see at the top, it says tax levy limit is the second line down. So you should be able to hopefully pick up on that one. So I'm not gonna go through all the calculations in that before, but the whole front side of this, there's no changes to it. That was the calculations, nothing changes with that. But if we turn it over to the second side, and on the back side of the second page, on the left-hand side, the second big number there is capital local expenditures. So when I went back into that formula to take a look at it, I noticed I had transposed a number. And I said, uh-oh. I saw the error, but I didn't know if it was to the good or the bad, so I was a little worried. So I put it in, and it was to the good. It freed up quite a bit of money. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was somewhere near like $70,000.
Which numbers were transposed?
It's that, well, you can't see it here, it's a formula. It was a transposition inside the formula, and I happened to transpose a number, my beginning number, which freed up the money, which was good, but that brought us up to 3.64%. So it was almost a 1/4% higher. So like I said, it was about $70,000. So 70,000 times 4 is about 280,000, which is 1%. So yes, so we found a 1/4% there. And that was strictly the formula. I transposed a number in my formula there. So corrected that, so we were able to come up with about an additional $70,000 to $75,000. So lo and behold, we were able to address some of those additions. We went over this in Finance Committee. I know we've seen it throughout here. And also tonight, you should be accepting a retirement, so I put in a simple computation in there to offset those challenges. So in the additions to the third draft, and I also, in front of you, there is a one-pager in here that was just a listing of all the considerations we had. And what I tried to do was kind of put it in this, it's not in the same order, but we did change the account name, so instead of the first one being salary, or 9 through 12, it's seal of biliteracy. So adding that in for an additional $3,000. The arts and education,
Hang on a second.
yep.
I just want to make sure everybody's in the same, and I'm looking around and I'm seeing that people aren't. So we're looking at the third page of the document that we started with,
Additions and deletions, yeah.
which says additions to the third revenue draft budget at,
right.
and then additions to the third draft budget at 4919. This one's revenue, no, we're not on that, we're on this.
Well, they're both of them. You can reference both of them.
I know, but I want to make sure if you're working off this one, we don't have people
Right.
looking at a different document,
Gotcha.
because
Yep.
then there will be confusion, so.
So the second one is arts and education, additional $5,000. Remember, the following year, we get approximately half of that back in BOCES aid. We also had an alternative high school placement that just came to us. So we had to put that one on there. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I wanted to say, we already transport there, so there was no transportation additional, so it's just the tuition.
That's the BOCES, I assume.
That's the,
right?
yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
The next one is the JAMF software. This will help with loading on computer carts and laptop carts for iPads, Macs, and the whole Apple line of things to be able to be updated at one time instead of going computer by computer by computer. So this will create a lot of efficiencies.
And that's also a reducing cost because it's through BOCES, right?
That is the plan.
Yes, okay.
Correct.
It goes from 16,550 to 13,050 to 13,703.
Correct. Yeah, we are going to purchase that through BOCES. And we did find out we can purchase it through there, and we hope that maybe the price will come down.
Yeah.
We don't expect it to go up, though. Navion software for the guidance office, $6,700. Once again, we get about half of that back the following year, and then subsequent years as we go forward. We're also looking at sustainability throughout this process. And another addition we had to put in was for the health insurance for the guidance aide who is retiring, so this would be for the replacement person. And also, the last one there is providing transportation for field hockey to Pine Plains. Yes.
Before you go on, going back to the guidance aid health insurance, that number is the total number for that one, right?
They're all the totals, the difference is just the increase in.
Right, no, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, because you're
Yes.
talking about it just in terms of,
Yes, one family
right,
EPO 20 plan.
okay.
Yes.
Right.
And so that was an additional of just over $85,000. And if we go over to the next page, there is a decrease, once again, going back to that same retirement, looking to reduce the salary by approximately $14,500 out of the budget. So we're looking at total changes in this proposed changes from draft 3 to draft 4 of $70,650. It is a total budget of just over $35 million, $4,961, which is a budget of 3.2%. The tax levy is 3.63%. And our maximum allowable is 3.64. So we're under the tax cap this year by $2,811. So under, not right at, but, you know, I think, so. Do anybody have questions?
Jack?
Is the alternative high school placement, is that for one student?
Yes. Yes.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I have a question. So putting the field hockey transportation here, that means we would be considering going forward with a merge program? Is that?
Yeah, that's under that assumption, yes. Again, I want to point out, this is more for people watching this at home than for all of you, because I know I sound like a broken record every year saying this, but when the board adopts a budget and when people vote on the budget, they're voting for a bottom line number. There are things that could happen between now and the end of the school year, now and the middle of summer, now and the beginning of the school year. We could have kids come in, we could have kids go out. I'm not saying that the specific thing you brought up is likely to change, although they haven't given us a final number of that. So it's an estimate on our part, but that additional transportation assumes that.
But I mean, yes, I agree with what you're saying, but it would mean then, even if the numbers change, that there probably wouldn't be a field hockey team here, because we've now taken the money out.
Yeah, we don't have enough
Changed.
kids for our own.
Right, but if
to
they
have a
were to
field.
like come out of the woodwork, it would have to come from somewhere else, the money, in order, because we've taken it out now.
The money for coaching field hockey was not taken out.
That was already in the budget.
Do not know what the fee or whether or not we need to provide a coach to Pine Plains at this time. So the
Okay.
money is there in the budget if we need to provide the coach.
Right.
Or unless we need to
So that's-
pay half of Pine Plains coaching salary. We don't know yet, that has not been
okay.
reached
And
yet.
if we don't spend it, then we don't spend it. But it's there in case we need it under that scenario.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Come up with another sport.
Any other questions?
I would ask, well, I don't want to cut off questions, of course, but before we kind of wrap this up, I just want Tom to take a couple of minutes to go through the revenue side of this, because as you all know, there's an expenditure side, there's a revenue side, so, but I don't want to cut off any questions on what you've said up to this point.
No other, can we move on to revenue?
Okay?
Yep.
So Tom, I just want you to give us a review of this, you don't have to go through it line by line, but
Yeah,
highlight.
I'll hit the highlights.
Yes, thank you.
The first one, of course, is the biggest number of all, and this is your real property taxes. You see that going up 3.63%, a little under $1,050,000. The payments in lieu of taxes, this is for just across the way, and this is, I can't remember how many more years, but we got
You're
quite a
talking
few
about
more.
over at,
What do they call it? This Brookmead?
yeah, Brookmead, right?
Yeah.
That's correct.
So this is payment from there, and every year this ramps up. Likewise, it's a part of your tax cap figures too. One of the better thing, well, I want to say better, but one thing as we went along in the budget process, we see charges for services, non-resident tuition. We do have, and one of the things I did earlier in the process was I realized that as I was going through the special education area, that one of the children that we are providing services for is actually a foster child from another school district, and I can bill them back for that. So this is an offset to our expense. It's an offset that we'll bill to them, so it washes out. So there's revenue on the one side, but there's also an expense, but it washes itself out. The other area which has been very good, and we're really liking to see it, but it seems as though right now it's plateauing, is that interest and earnings. We were able to add an additional $70,000 to our interest earnings this year. And we hope to, I know we're going to eclipse it this year, and hope as we go forward, we continue to do that. And hopefully, this is an area we can continue to expand upon as revenues. Always nice to see revenues go up, just making sure that you get them. In the next session, sale of property insurance recoveries is just a number. We haven't quite been reaching the 25,000, so I reduced that to 20,000. Some years we do reach it, but in the past few years we've been running a little bit short. So this is a little precaution. The second part, miscellaneous, the big one there, refund of BOCE aid services. I know BOCES came and gave their presentation. Remember, this is the money. BOCES is not allowed to have a fund balance. So at the end of the year, and this is done by, they're called COSERs. They don't call them budget codes, they're COSERs by COSERs. They look at every single one and they say, well, and it can be a plus or a negative. They will look at a program and say, they spent this much money in the program, $1 million. We collected $1.1 million from all the school districts. We're gonna refund $100,000. But it can go the reverse too, and they said, we shorted ourselves, now we're gonna collect that $100,000. But over the years, it's been averaging anywhere from 80 to about 120,000, so return, right? So I budget for 100, and usually we're pretty good at that. This year was 117.
And they return any overage to the district proportionately, and what do they use to do that?
They use with Arvada.
Okay.
That's resident aided attendance. So they look at your entire school district, how many kids do we have in our school district compared to the other ones. But it gets weighted by the type of student. Special education gets an extra weighting to it, and things of that nature, so that plays a factor into it. But pretty much our special education numbers are kind of the same across the county as a percentage. It's not like we're really far under what everybody else is, but we are under. Refund of prior year expenses, once again, that's a lot of like expenses that come back to us that we paid out this year but are refunded the following year. Miscellaneous revenues that we have come in. If we flip over to the next page, our state aid. If you look at our state aid, it overall has gone up only $24,000. Now, there's a little bit of an offset to this, okay? We had a reduction on our building aid because we had some building aid come off. It wasn't humongous, but it was about $50,000. So really, we received about $75,000 more in state aid overall over the previous year. Some of it were aid-driven types of things. You see BOCES aid is down, but transportation aid is up. There's some other aids that are up too. Small ones, but they do add up after a little bit. We got more foundation aid. I think the entire process, I think we received about $30,000 in additional new foundation aid. So an increase of about $24,000. The next one is federal aids. We do Medicaid reimbursements. This is run through the Office of Special Programs, led by Emily Davison, and this is a refund of our students who are Medicare eligible, and we provide medical services for them.
Medicaid eligible.
What's that?
Medicaid eligible?
Yes. Yeah, Medicaid, not Medicaid eligible, not Medicare, sorry. And then in the next section, interfund transfers. This is, in some cases, helps to offset or reduce our taxes. The first one is interfund transfer to debt service. Now, this is from the debt service from the 2006 project, the $24 million project. At that time, we were earning 4% and 5% interest rates. So we, at the end of that project, had about $1 million left over in funds. And the only thing you can do is use those money to reduce that debt, okay? So we've been applying it against that debt. But I just want to let you know, we were able to do it for 120, we've gone to 180. We're slowly having to wean ourselves off as we're under like 300,000. So we'll be able to maybe do it 80 or 60, 60, 40, 40, 20, 20, and it will be gone. So that is slowly running itself out. But once again, we have a new project and we are now starting to earn some more interest there. So we'll start to see that ramp up. And the second part, or the second one, appropriated fund balance, that's using our monies in our fund balance to reduce the levy overall. We've been over the years, have now gotten it down to 850,000. So when I'm putting a budget together, I'm trying to make sure between the revenues and the expenditures, I get a delta of at least $850,000. If I get that, our fund balance remains the same. If we get more revenues, then our fund balance starts to go up. If we get more expenditures, our fund balance starts to go down. So my aim is to make sure that there is a delta of at least 850. That number got way too high, and it was hard to meet. So it's been nice to get that. We're almost to the point where 750 is probably where I want it to do, but I think maybe next year, maybe only 50,000 to slow that down. Or depending on how our fund balance is at the end of this year, we may have different ideas about it.
Well, I mean, you look where we've gone from 1,150,000 in 16, 17, down 850,000. I mean, that's been a good steady decrease, not a shock to the system, but a meaningful reductions, and certainly not increasing now, which is
Right.
the direction we don't want to go.
No, we should be, yeah.
I just also want to make the statement that Tom referred to foundation aid, and that's been kind of a political football up in Albany over the last number of years. But foundation aid is supposed to be like your base aid, regardless of what your expenses are. That's supposed to be your base aid. And just so you know, our foundation aid was a 0.7% increase. So, I mean, there were years way before, back 10 years ago, where we were getting a lot more than 0.7, and 0.7 is not a lot. However, some of the higher need districts in our region, downstate, are getting significantly more than 0.7% increase there. And I won't name any districts in public, but I did talk with at least several superintendents in the Mid-Hudson Valley who are superintendents of relatively small, fairly low needs, certainly not high needs districts, and amazingly, their foundation aid increase was all 0.7%. So I'm starting to kind of informally piece together the formula that somebody used up there to say, these districts, they don't need much. We got to give them something. So what's the magic number? 0.7 sounds about right. And I'm telling you, at least several districts right in this area got 0.7. So I don't think that was a coincidence. Just so you know what we're getting in base operating aid, it's less than 1%.
There's actually 9 categories: city, suburban, rural, average need, low need, high need, and they all get their percentage. So if you're rural, low need, you get 0.7. You're city, high need, you get 7. And that's how they do it. They do it by blocks, how we're classified. We're considered rural, low need. So that's how they do some of their formulas. Aid driven for foundation aid is driven by that reason. Here's one of the things, though. If they were rerunning it over again, we would lose money because our enrollment is dropped. And that would happen with a lot of districts. But they just go on. You're not going to get anything less than
We're safe harmless.
We're
So.
safe harmless on that. But if they were to say, okay, we're going to throw it out the door and we're going to start all over again, I don't know if I'd want to do that at this point.
So Joe,
At
what
this
kind
point, I
of,
wouldn't be lobbying for them to change that because it could be, we could end up in a worse position.
what kind of percentages were you seeing locally for sort of the mid-range need and the high need, just for perspective?
I wasn't. I was only talking with my colleagues who called me to complain. So nobody that was getting 7% or 5% was calling me to complain.
Okay.
My colleagues who were getting 0.7% were calling me to say, can you believe that's all they were able to get? That's how, a lot of grumbling about how they didn't feel our local legislators were going to bat for those districts. So I have no idea what, the Newburghs, the Poughkeepsies of the world were getting. I mean, we could probably
find out.
we could probably find out, but they weren't calling me up to complain.
Once we get the, all the formulas and everything, it will tell us plainly, right, how much you're getting.
Right.
For whatever, any formula, they spell out what that formula is. And like I say, okay, city, school district, high need, that's what they get. Everybody got that across the state. New York City, the big 5 work a little different.
Well, and I think that the takeaway is that low-need school districts like Rhinebeck are putting more into the pot than they're getting back. I'm not saying that's is or isn't right or fair, and you can make a case for the needier school district should get a bigger part of the pie, but the pie is comprised of what the taxpayers in every school district are putting in, and I think without making a value judgment about it, we're probably putting in more than our fair share versus what we're getting back out of it in terms of aid. That's all. That's nothing new.
No.
That's nothing new. That didn't just happen this year or recently. I mean, it's been that way for a long time and across the state. It's not just Rhinebeck either. But it is what it is.
There's a lot of business officials are getting upset about this because state aid is being treated as it always has been treated for the past 3 decades. But the one thing that's different is now the tax cap. That's what's now bound our hands together to say, you know, our community could probably afford it, but trying to go out there year after year to exceed it is that's ludicrous. But what they are now is they're not treating us the same. We're all under the same rules of the tax cap. So we should kind of be under the same type of rules that districts shouldn't be getting 7% while some get less than 1%. And this, in the tax cap, that's not fair. That's not fair. How much extra now has these big city school districts get? 10% this year? Between state aid and they're able to generate 2-3% in tax levy? That's a lot of extra money to be doing when we're dealing with, all right, we're actually pretty high for our tax cap at 3.6, and that's because of capital project. But most of them are in the 2.5 range. An extra 0.7, oh wow, all right, I'm getting 3.5 to work with when some places are getting 9-10% to work with. So it's now, people are now really starting to see this. Well, wait a second, you're driving a lot of money towards the high needs, and we understand that. Like Joe said, understand it, but we now starting to say, this is getting to be a little unfair. Every year you're driving all the extra aid that way. We're not getting our fair share of that anymore. Well, you know, overall, might have been 4% across the entire state, but, all right, what did we see every year? Less than 1, less than 1, less than 1, less than 1. It's catching up. But
Anyway, so that's where we're at on the revenue side. That part of it's not a pretty picture, although could be worse, I guess. We could be getting less, but we're thankful for what we get and wish that they had the political will to level everybody up instead of robbing from Peter to take care of other needs that are definitely there, and there's no 2 ways about it. So, anyway.
Anybody have any questions, any further? Steve?
Just thank you to Tom and Joe for putting all this together this year and every year, really. But this has been a much nicer process and smooth process to go through, including the workshop. I'm glad you mentioned a capital project as being the cause of us being over the 2% cap, because I think that that's important to understand as we go into the community. People ask us, what's 3.64, where did that come from? Right? So it is basically the capital project that drove that, because that's 1.4 million extra in
yeah.
revenue. So.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, you know, and this is to safeguard against next year going out with a 7 or 8% and still be within the tax cap. And that would have been just a shocker, and this was kind of to ease the pain going towards it. Plus, the extra revenues we're picking up now will help reduce our principal as we go out to borrow the money. So that's also another help for us as we go forward with this. But you're right, that is got to be an informational piece that people understand.
Job well done. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
We appreciate the feedback on the process, because we did make some pretty significant changes in the timeline and the process, and you know, you'll give us our marching orders next year as to whether we want to run the process the same way, and see whether this was a fluke or whether it just makes sense to do it the way we did it this year. So thank you for bearing with us as we tried something new, and knock on wood, it came out all right.
I mean, I think it's, you know, double-edged sword. I mean, it's stressful waiting, right? Because then you feel like you're in a rush and you're catching up, but on the other hand, you're working with better data when you get it instead of assumptions that may be completely wrong. So I think from a transparency standpoint, it was was the best way to go.
Yeah. But thank you for the feedback.
I hope you were
Appreciate
getting
that.
positive feedback from the administrators too, and their ability to.
Yeah, no,
think more.
yes, and they appreciated not having to do, like, in the beginning of February, "All right, you gotta cut this much, and you gotta let us know by the end of the week, because we gotta bring this to the board." I mean, they appreciated not being under that level of stress too, so I think, I haven't heard a complaint yet within our organization. I think everybody's, of course, it didn't hurt that we weren't looking to cut $1 million.
Yes.
Okay? But still, regardless, we were dealing with better numbers, and I think in a less, how do I want to say this? In a less positive year, I think there'll be fewer people freaking out sooner, because we don't know, and no, we were not going to have to cut $1 million from our budget. But at the end of the day, we wind up not having to cut anything, the year before, but there was a lot of angst. And we understand that, and none of us wants that angst on the part of our staff or our community, so I think this took some of the air out of that balloon. We'll see how it works next year. Okay?
Okay. All right, so we can move on to the regular meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the March 26, 2019 regular meeting?
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion?
we revised.
It's been
Yes,
revised.
you have revised.
You have it at your places, yeah.
Yeah. All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have no public for comment, so we can move on to, do we need to do the budget development update? since we
Unless
just
there
had
are
it?
additional things that people want to
Questions?
discuss relative to the budget, I mean,
No? All right, I
Okay.
think we're good.
Good.
Let's move on to committee reports. All right, we start off with policy.
Let's see, the policy minutes, we reviewed policy 5220, student publications, and we reviewed that policy due to the topic of censorship that was raised in an article written for the Rhinebeck Reality, volume 2019-18, issue 7, March 2019. And we didn't see anything prohibitive. In order to fully understand the concerns, we are arranging for a meeting with the student author and the student editor-in-chief. The second we reviewed was 5405, student mental health. Joe edited the document, tailoring the language to our district, and the administrators have reviewed the policy, confirming that we currently are or can easily be in compliance. There are some very minor edits still needed, but the document will be ready for a first reading by the board at our meeting. We also continued our discussion in regards to the skipping grade policy and what that might entail. Would it be by committee, only elementary grades? What are the criteria and who sets the criteria? Joe will review the topic with the administrators. We're doing a change on how we're handling the policy book. Thankfully, Whitney suggested that we add the dates to each policy that we've reviewed. It seems like a good idea, and we're going to follow through. Our next meeting is April 25th. Depending on the availability of the Rhinebeck Realty student author and editor to discuss the policy of 5220.
Any questions? Jacqueline?
Well, I just had an additional comment on the draft of 5405, student mental health.
Okay.
Now be, sorry.
Sure.
Since I know there are still some, maybe there are some edits coming, or maybe this was.
we made the edit that you
Maybe,
asked
right,
for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the second page, under teaching and supporting mental health. Wait, take it, everybody gets there. You're there.
I'm there.
The third paragraph, which starts elements of positive mental health include.
I see.
Page 5405.
Yeah.
Page 5405. I
The
think.
second page you said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the second page of 5405.
Yeah.
The third paragraph, just below the bullet points. I feel like that, this paragraph, which is one sentence, is a confusing, it's confusing as a sentence. So maybe it could either be broken out into bullet points or just the division of semicolons and commas looked at, but it doesn't read smoothly to me. So I won't go into, correcting it, but just to point out
Mhm.
that could be cleaned up, maybe just made into bullets.
Any other comments on this policy? No? All right. Thank you for your eagle eye, Jacqueline.
Eagle eye or
Eagle. I always appreciate a good editor.
Careful to enunciate.
Exactly.
I was
The
also
eagle
a
eye.
little like, I don't love the way the bullets above that paragraph, the fact that they're not all consistent and like how to obtain, ways to prevent, and then just decrease and increase. But that's really nitpicking. So I can let that go. Of course, I can't
Are you
let it go
sure?
so much as to not say it.
You gonna lose some sleep
Just in case
tonight?
somebody else, feels similarly.
Or in case somebody else on that committee wrote it that way. But in the interest of full disclosure, this was a state ed
Yes.
written
I gather
sample
it is.
policy, so,
Yeah. Just customized.
yes.
All right, thank you. I would like to thank the committee for reaching out to the kids on the newspaper and asking them to share a little bit more about what they were talking about in the article. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we're going to be meeting with them at our next meeting, which is April 25th. And we're going to be meeting with them at the end of the day so they don't have to come out of classes. And I also believe that in setting this up, Dr. Davenport asked me if, I guess there's an additional student on their editorial board who it was suggested that she might benefit from being at that meeting, as well as Mrs. Wheeler, who is the advisor. So it'll be the four of them and the four of us. So,
Great.
More the merrier.
yes, yeah.
That's great. Excellent. All right, finance.
Finance, okay.
You're on the
so,
hot seat, Liz.
We had a very fun finance committee meeting with Steve. Steve was there to help go over some of the technology stuff. We talked about, as was mentioned earlier, the JAMF software, which, as Tom had mentioned, the software is, the initial cost is going to be $16,550. That includes the software and the training. It qualifies for BOCES state aid. The software program, which is specifically for the Apple devices, updates all software and applications automatically. Currently, we are manually updating each individual device in both buildings with software and application updates, which has become impractical use of time and is not providing teachers with optimum performance. The JPMF software will do the updates automatically and maintain a current inventory of our Apple devices, both hardware and software. We talked about some of the improvements requiring board approval. There are 3 leases that require board approval before the Duchess BOCES agrees to purchase for our use. So Duchess BOCES will own them and insure while we lease. The leases are vital for students and teachers to have optimum experience with connectivity, security, and storage. The first one is from Adirondack Cabling, which will upgrade the internal fiber system for both buildings. The second is CSI, which will provide more switches and gigs, improving the equipment and infrastructure, both of which are E-ratable, so we'll receive a 50% rebate. The third is from CSI. It's an HPE Nimble Hybrid Array, which is a virtual server replacing the storage system that we currently have, and that one is not going to be E-ratable. We also talked about the dark fiber network, and we have an aerial solution. Another key improvement to our building's connectivity is installing a dark fiber network. Best Web can provide an aerial solution with a one-time installation price of $62,240, with an annual maintenance fee of $3,432, and that includes repairs and damages. The project will be funded by Smart School Bond Fund, and New York State will reimburse us for the program after the project is completed so that the district is made whole, at which point we will return the funds into the capital fund. In addition, we should also be receiving E-rate funding for this project. We reviewed the fourth budget review. Changes included an additional non-resident tuition expense, an increase in state aid, and as Tom mentioned, he caught a typo in the building aid column. We are now 47 below the tax levy limit. And items for consideration, which we also just reviewed on the list that are bolded, are recommended expenditures that are also sustainable. Our next meeting is May 2nd.
Questions for finance?
Yes, Jacqueline.
Can somebody explain real quickly what dark fiber network is?
Yeah,
It's just a direct link between Chancellor and here. And it's much, like, you know, teachers and Chancellor complain about the connectivity speed because they have to do all their authentication here.
Yeah.
So this will speed that all up, and they found a solution that can go on the poles, but it's a different route, but it's gonna get here eventually.
I was gonna say, who's giving us poll space?
So there is an explanation, and I don't mind explaining if you care. The first company that when we put out a bid for this last year, we had one company bid it. They, because of all the nonsense with the poles and who owns this piece of the pole and all that stuff, their price was rather expensive. And they did not have certification to go up on the poles and hang wire on the poles. So it was kind of a waste of time. So we started then looking at going underground so we didn't have to mess around with the poles. And that was less expensive, but still expensive enough, but it was better. However, we would have needed a partnership with the Village of Rhinebeck to have them grant us easements to dig underneath the edge of the lawns of 5 or 6 homes between the end of our track and Chancellor, okay, and go under the road and whatnot. And we were working with the village on that, and they were certainly more than willing to work with us on that. We're very cooperative about that. But because the time had, and you could jump in here anytime, because the bid was so old, we needed to rebid again to use E-rate monies, and when we rebid it again, we got another bidder who bid it for going on the poles. And this company that put in a bid most recently is out of Westchester, and they gave us a very competitive price, and they're certified to go on the poles, and they included in their price, which comes out to I'll just say, several thousand a month, right? Is it the month or the year?
For what?
For the cost of this after.
Oh, it's only a couple thousand a year.
A year, okay, I'm sorry. So a year,
34, 32.
Yes.
yeah. It also includes a maintenance plan, so if a tree falls on the fiber, they will come out and fix it without us having to go out of pocket for that expense. So all of a sudden, it seems like even though our preference in a perfect world was to tunnel underneath, because you don't have to worry about stuff falling on them, the price of this, and with a maintenance plan, is like too good to pass up. We met with, Steve and I met with Mayor Bassett just this afternoon to kind of give them a heads up that we were changing direction and why, because I didn't want them to read about it in a Bill Kemble article tomorrow morning. because they had done some work on our behalf to try to clear the way for the easements. So we met with Gary, and Gary says, yeah, it's great news for you guys. We also extended the offer to them, again, that if there was any way they wanted to grab some strands of that fiber, if that would help the village, we're more than willing to partner with them on that. We also brought to their attention that we believe that this company is looking to break into Dutchess County, which is why we got such a favorable price on this, and that they may want to think about contacting this company themselves to see what kind of a deal they might. Now, I don't know whether they had the money to do that. That's their concern, but we want to at least let them know these guys are coming to town, and they seem to be interested in perhaps building out the fiber network. So they are now aware that, and they have contact information if they're so inclined, they being the village, to reach out to this company and say, hey, while you're here, maybe you want to run some fiber for us. And if they do, that's great. And if they don't, for whatever reason, that's their decision. But they're well aware of what we're doing and how much it's costing us. So anyway, we're thinking that it is doable. I hate to even say this, but I'll say it anyways. We're thinking that we ought to be able to have this done during the summer, before school comes back in September. So
That's great.
yeah,
That's really
so
great.
that's where we're at with that.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, moving on to curriculum, those are mine. So we spent the meeting talking about planning for next year. Marvin sent out his letter to faculty requesting their ideas for summer work. Those should be coming back by May 1st. We also spent a lot of time talking about the timeline and the phases for the new next-gen standards, which cover the core subjects as well as comp sci, physical education, and the arts. By June 2022, all next-gen curricula except for science will be implemented, and then the next-gen science standards will be done by being tested by June 23 for bio and earth and space, and June 24 for chem and physics. Just briefly, we talked about the ELA refusal rates, and they've come down relatively significantly from last year. We only had a 10.8% refusal rate this year. We're hoping that some of that has to do with our communications beforehand. But in looking at sort of longitudinally the testing data that Marvin collects from year to year, they have brought forward sort of a relative weakness in K-5 writing. So the faculty at Chancellor have been working with a consultant from BOCES on the Lucy Calkins Unit of Study program, which basically should provide much better opportunity for differentiation of writing lessons, and also provides a much stronger communication and feedback loop between the teacher and the student. It's much more one-to-one. So that's looking pretty positive. They're doing a lot of work on that. They did last summer. They're doing some more this summer. Elementary science curriculum is going to need some significant work this summer. If some of you will remember that the ALA curriculum that we've approved had social studies and science woven through it. Now we need to extract those lessons, and there is some question about whether we use the Science 21 kit-based model or live labs, which sounded to us incredibly interesting. It was really, kids being shown a phenomenon in the natural world and then having to sort of reverse engineer it to figure out why it happened. And so the fifth grade is really interested in that live lab program, and they're going to do some PD work over the summer with a BOCES rep who's actually written that program. High school social studies should be up and changed by June of 2021 with the Regents exam for global, and June 2022 for U.S. history. And they're sort of talking about civic readiness, and there's the potential for a seal of civic readiness for graduation diplomas, much like we do with foreign language, math, and science. But more to come on that as they suss it out. Any questions? All right, moving on to long-range planning.
So those are mine. First, apologies to Marvin for spelling his last name wrong.
You never forget.
Just had a couple of T's. So the previous meeting, we had asked Joe to get Lloyd on the phone for a conference call. We had gathered all this data for the last couple of years through long-range planning. We have a CDET committee in place that is also looking at curriculum and program. We just didn't know how those two should interact, if at all. So Lloyd walked us through a lot of observations of having worked with the district for a very long time. Thought that they should really be a standalone, because I think long-range planning has a lot of the finance and enrollment focus, and that's not really the direction of the CDEP plan, so we are going to keep them separate for now. We also talked about looking at a 5-year plan and breaking that down into 1-year manageable goals. So what we agreed to do was to have a 1-year plan looking at enrollment across the next 5 years and seeing what that looks like with respect to staff and full-time versus 0.8, that type of thing. And then looking and see how that comes out, and over the summer have an administrative retreat to kick that process off of trying to come up with a 5-year sustainable plan, looking at improving instruction and delivery programs and keeping Rhinebeck, but knowing that with declining enrollment and the conversation we just had about New York State aid and the budget, we do need to make some changes potentially to keep us sustainable. So hopefully to have that done by December so we can have it for next year's budget cycle.
Any questions for long-range planning? Okay.
Cool.
All right. Let's move on to action. No, we don't.
Comments?
We have an
Yep.
opportunity for good news. Who has good news? There is lots. Joe.
Yeah, I have a couple. First of all, the school lab initiative, which came out of Assemblyman Cahill's office. You remember the previous one was for the high school, and we bought or are buying a bunch of goodies for the physics lab in this building to go along with the capital project. We were awarded one, I think, in the amount of $20,000 for the elementary school. And the good news is that Brett King and David Wolfen submitted our grant just a couple of weeks ago, so it's in the pipeline.
Great.
Like to tell you, I can promise you when we'll get the grant, because the last one took quite a few years, and there were some hurdles at the state level regarding the funding stream, so it wasn't anybody's fault. It was waiting for them to release the money up in Albany, and that's really what dragged it out. But the grant's in, so that's good news. The other thing I wanted to mention is we are going to be embarking on a pilot with a Dutchess County, I believe Dutchess County group called the Community Food Network and FeedHudsonValley.org, which is set up to collect and distribute unused food that.
So cool. I just read about that.
Yes, I know you did.
I
Yeah, where did you read about that? On a local website, perhaps?
don't,
No.
That's
No,
where I
I
read
don't
about
think
it.
that was it. No, it was in a different state.
yeah, it was a.
Well, there was an article about some state some school district in Indiana
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something
yeah.
that
That's what I saw.
was doing something, and then there was some chirping on my favorite website, after our own, of course, our school districts, of course. But I talked to Larry Anthony like the next morning, and I said, hey, because there was some questioning about, can you do this? And some people who spoke with great authority were saying, no, you can't do this. There's laws about reusing food, and there's laws about dispersing government commodities, all sorts of impediments that were coming from this reliable source. And so I talked to Larry. I said, so what's the deal with this? He said, well, no, we can do that. He said, we're covered under the Good Samaritan law. So there's no liability for the school district if we do that. And he said, in fact, he said, I've already been looking into this for us as well as for Pine Plains and Red Hook, where he also manages their food service programs. And he said that, you know, there isn't a lot of food that these school districts have to throw out, but he said there is inevitably some waste at the end of a period of time. You know, they try to, you know, reuse what they can and resell what they can, you know, if it's in good shape, obviously, but it's inevitable that you get to a certain point in a week or whatever where you can't keep it anymore. So supposedly this Thursday, someone from the Community Food Network / FeedHudsonValley.org is coming here, and they're going to take some leftover food items that we couldn't really carry over for the week and a half that school is going to be closed. So we'll see how it works.
That's great.
Yes,
That's
I
really
was happy, and I was happy that Larry had already looked into it and made the arrangements. I didn't say a thing to him. He said, "Oh yeah, we're going to try doing that next week," which is this week. So I said, "That's very cool." So that's good news.
That's really great news.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
really great.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I have.
Other good news? Diane.
The drama club put on a great play this weekend.
Awesome.
Got a chance to see it?
It was laugh out loud funny. It was so good.
It was good. So
And despite all the angst running up to it about set designs and all of that, it was really fantastic. You know, lots of mothers were surprised at their children's ability. It's really fun.
I was leaning towards vegetarianism, but I kind of changed my mind after sitting through that. But it's okay.
careful what plants you buy.
All right, is there any old business?
That's okay. Yeah. That's thank you.
Old business? Joe?
Hang on a second.
Sorry.
Got distracted. No, I don't.
Okay.
No.
Still no public for comment. Any other? Mark?
I just want to point out to you in the pile of documents that we were given tonight that there's information about the Dutchess County School Boards Association. And I want to point out on June 20th, which is a Thursday night, will be the Dutchess County School Board Association annual meeting, which is actually a different time of the year than normal, and it's also a week of the month than normal meeting night. That'll be a dinner at Arlington High School. All board members are invited, including newly elected board members. And there will be a presentation on sustainability from the Dutchess County Resource Recovery Agency. And the theme for next year for the County School Board Association is going to be sustainability. So hopefully there'll be a couple of presentations throughout the year at our meetings about different sustainability topics. So just keep that on your radar, in addition to some of the others that we kind of cover every year. But just wanted to let you know about that and put that on your calendar. There's no cost for the dinner.
That's great. And so in terms of sustainability, is that environmental sustainability
Yes.
or all kinds of, okay, that's really cool.
Political sustainability. Actually, yes.
Yeah, that would be awesome too. All right. Any questions about Dutchess County BOCES? Okay.
About what?
Steve?
I'm sorry.
Dutchess County BOCES.
Oh.
Steve, I think you had
Yeah,
your
I just
hand up.
wanted to give a shout out to Justin Randall and his principal's engineering class for inviting us to his marble project. I actually went a week before, stuck in and watched them working on it, which was really exciting. It definitely was the most compact group of projects that I've seen over the course of the couple years I've been going. So thanks again for having us in.
That's great. Sorry, I missed that. I love that. All right. Any other?
I have a few, if
Yes,
the board
please.
members are tapped out on others. There, just a reminder that at our next meeting, April 23rd, we will be voting on the BOCES administrative budget, as well as two individuals who are running for two BOCES board seats, Ralph Chimento and Ralph Coates. The first Ralph from Spack&Kill, the second Ralph from Poughkeepsie are running for the two open seats on the BOCES board. And the BOCES budget, administrative budget, $4,656,822 will also be, as presented to us a couple weeks ago, will also be on the board meeting, our board meeting agenda to vote. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that. In kind of following and getting excited about some of the work happening in our district, school district, and our community regarding the Rhinebeck Eco Challenge, which actually started in our elementary school with Chantel Collins and Julie Tate and some of the students that are in there. It's either before school or after school environmental group, and I started talking. I started talking with Whitney after our last meeting about some things that we could do here. Except for tonight, where we still have plastic forks and spoons, everything else that we have is biodegradable. We did price out disposable utensils that are made out of bamboo. They are quite expensive. So my suggestion was that we just use metal knives and spoons, and we're not feeding 40 people here a board meeting, and we'll just wash them and reuse them. And I just want to make a public statement that we're trying to do our own part in our own little way to say, yeah, it's a good idea, and we'll try to set an example. So
That's great.
just
Yeah.
just so you're all aware about that.
Appreciate not having plastic water bottles on the table.
Well, that's yes, that's what we did also.
Pretty sure you got this from my mother's cabinet. No, I grew up with this. Absolutely my grandma.
Kool-Aid. We could no, never mind.
We used to use these way back when I started on the.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They took a hiatus a few years ago, and we got to thinking, so we're throwing all this plastic in the garbage can after the board meeting, so let's start reusing. So
Take the dust out of them?
no, I like that crunchiness in my water. Thank you.
That little musty
Can you
smell.
put Kool-Aid in ours? Come on, some Kool-Aid in ours?
Don't drink the Kool-Aid, Tom. So the other thing I wanted to mention under other, if I can, is Tom and I had a very animated discussion earlier today about one particular feature of the recently passed state budget, which is the provision for employees to take 3 hours of paid time off for each and every possible vote that one could imagine, national elections, state elections, primaries,
Fire
local
districts,
elections, fire
library
districts,
budgets.
dog catcher elections, whatever. And there's quite a bit of concern out there in the field, especially amongst fellow educators, because our employees already have paid personal leave that could be used for that reason. But as we're starting to understand the law, it's on any time, anywhere, any place. We're wondering how we would cover for people who decided, I'm taking the first 3 hours of the school day off to go vote. I don't want to be an alarmist about it, but the more we think about it, it's like, I can't believe we're gonna have to deal with this, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention so you're aware, and we'll just follow it and do what we have to do, but we're
You
not.
have to give 2 days notice if they're gonna say.
Yeah. And still, you might, even be able to get that many substitutes.
No, you better close it or having a 3
Yeah,
month delay.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And I
So,
can see some of them saying, here are the times I'm taking off for the entire year. Here's all the primaries, here's all the votes. I'm gonna take the first 3 hours of every single one of these days off.
That's what the law says. You don't even have to go vote.
no, there's no, you don't have to prove that you went to vote.
No.
Did you figure out, could it come from personal time, or does it have to be?
Why would you take it from personal time when you?
No, I'm saying, so you.
Governor said
so
you don't?
we can't be used that way, that's what it's just.
Well, I imagine if there were limits on it in the state budget, an employee could take personal time, but if I'm an
It's a new-
employee, why would I take?
It's a new category,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, it is, it definitely is, yeah. No, we'll follow it, but,
When is it effective?
Immediately.
yeah. So it's effective for your school board vote in Monday 21st.
Let's see what happens.
The one that's here in our cafeteria.
That's the one, the very same. But you might be an employee who votes in Arlington because they live in Arlington. So they would take their 3 hours to drive down to Arlington and vote.
I guess we take off.
Or, even if they were employees
They can take
here,
from 12 to 3 off.
there's nothing to keep them from taking 3 hours. I mean, they don't have to verify that they voted. They have basically free 3 hours, as I understand
Our vote
it.
is in the afternoon, so
Doesn't matter.
they could take,
Yeah.
well, they wouldn't take the morning,
Why not?
presumably.
Well,
Have a nice breakfast at Bertolone.
It has to be during the time that the
When
election
the
is.
polls are open, right? I mean,
I don't know that the law is that specific. We have to find out
It's all-
more. It seems like you could drive a Mack truck through this
It's very vague.
through this law.
Well, it'd be good to find, because I imagine,
Surprising coming
this
out of
sounds like it's gonna have large financial implications
It
for
could.
the district, so.
It
Despite
could.
our constant request that they stop
The
giving us
unfunded.
unfunded mandates, here's yet another example.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Statewide,
all
not
for
just
people to
education.
vote, but
Everybody.
this isn't a field that people don't have the opportunity to vote.
Well, it's not just, it's
Polls are
everybody.
open till-
Everybody who works in New York State can do this. It's
Right.
not just education.
Yeah.
So,
you know, they could have done something simple like early voting. You know, it doesn't cost anybody anything.
Online voting.
Online voting. Crazy.
Anyway, just
All right.
I had to get that stuck out of my craw.
Okay.
Sorry,
All right. Any other?
I do not.
Okay. All right, moving on to action items. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Diane?
I'm sorry I didn't send an email about this. I don't necessarily want to remove it, but I just wanted 6.1.7, I just, could you maybe just talk about that?
Well, why don't you remove it and then we'll talk about it.
That's fine.
I think that's
Yep.
the proper way to do
That's
it.
fine, sorry, I should have.
No, it's no problem.
Can we have a motion to remove 6.1.7 for purposes of discussion?
so move.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, 6.1.7 has been removed. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the consent items without 6.1.7?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. Let's talk about 6.1.7. It's motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve a merger with Coleman High School for JV baseball for the spring 2018-19 season with Rhinebeck High School as the host school.
Sure. So they approached us a few weeks back, before the start of the season. They had they don't have enough for a JV team. They had 3 students who are, I don't know whether they're 9th graders or 10th grade, they're early high school students. One of them is a Rhinebeck student who goes to Coleman. And so we're already bringing a bus this way from Coleman in the afternoon. So transportation for them, I mean, it's not costing us a cent, okay? Well, we got to bring a bus back anyway, so they inquired as to whether we would be willing to allow those 3 students to have a merged team, which would allow those 3 students to play JV baseball. They ride back on the bus that's coming back from Coleman at that time anyway, and they're responsible for Coleman, that is, for returning the kids who have to go back to, across the river to transport their kids back there. The kid who goes to Rhinebeck, he's already here, so he doesn't have to go back across the river. So it seemed like a low-cost, low-impact way to provide an opportunity for those kids, and as long as it's not costing us anything, personally, I'm happy to help and recommend to you that you approve it.
So we had enough for a team, so this is
Yeah,
just, okay. so it
right,
wasn't
right. Yeah, we didn't need those 3 kids to make a team, although the numbers weren't huge, so it'll help us, but it's not like we wouldn't have our own program if we
Right.
rejected it, as I understand it from Steve
Are
Boucher.
they putting in for the cost of the coach or anything, or
No.
we're just doing the training?
I haven't asked them to. I mean, we're gonna hire that coach whether we agree to this merger or not. It's not like we have to hire another coach or pay for transportation, in which case I'd say you guys pick up the cost that you incur, but there's really no cost for them.
Okay.
Where's Coleman?
It's over in Kingston.
Kingston.
Just one of the Kingston High School?
Yeah, it's near
it's-
Kingston
it's-
High School, actually.
No, it's kind of, it is a little further. It's like past the thruway.
Okay.
Actually, the thruway runs parallel to the back of their property.
Past the Freeman, is it the Freeman that's right out there?
Past where?
The Freeman thing?
Yeah, it's past the Freeman Building too. Yeah, that's right. It's going out towards, it's going out like kind of towards Wiltwyck Country Club out that way, but not that far.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve a merger with Coleman High School for JV baseball for the spring 2018-19 season with Rhinebeck High School as the host school?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of...
I'm sorry, before you go on.
Yes.
Not on that motion, but I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the contribution of the Rhinebeck PTSO to item 6.1.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, as always, for their generous support of the newspaper and field trips. Thank you.
Good catch.
Yeah, very good catch, Lisa, thank you. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to adopt the following resolution? Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education hereby adopts the proposed budget for the 2019-20 school year in the amount of $35,004,961 and authorizes the following proposition to be placed on the ballot at the annual meeting on May 21st, 2019. Shall the Board of Education of the Rhinebeck Central School District be authorized to expend the sums of money which will be required for school district purposes for the 2019-20 school year in the amount of $35,004,961 and to levy the necessary tax therefore?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a question.
Lisa?
So this evening, we had our non-state mandated budget hearing.
Correct.
And we're adopting the recommended budget.
Correct.
So are we still obligated to have a further hearing?
Oh, yeah.
And what's the significance of that further hearing since we'll already have adopted?
That's the $64,000 question.
Uh-huh.
In my opinion, there is no significance to it, except for people who feel so inclined to express their opinion to you a week or so before the actual vote that they're either supportive of or not supportive of the budget, whereas the actual referendum is at the ballot box. To me, it makes absolutely no sense to me that the timing of the mandated budget hearing, because it's too late to change the budget, which is why we do it here. So if there were 30 people showing up saying, no, you got to take that out, no, then you could consider changing the budget that you adopted or putting it off for another 2 weeks and studying it further. So there's no rationale for the way the state does it. Sorry to say. As much of a surprise as that may be. Yes, I thought you might be.
We'll probably put on the book about 70 years ago.
Yeah.
I know.
I had to come in horse and buggy. Okay.
All right. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools?
Do we vote that one?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got distracted.
Oops.
Motion? We motion, all those in favor?
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's all right.
that's unanimous, that motion passes. Thank you for keeping me.
That's an important.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
That is
we
the
couldn't miss
most
that
important
one.
right? May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to adopt the following resolution? Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education hereby approves the contract with Dutchess County BOCES for the acquisition of computer technology hardware, software, and related equipment through a 3-year installment purchase agreement, IPA, commencing in the 2018-19 school year with a total principal cost of $107,434.41. And be it further resolved that the Rhinebeck Central School District will pay Dutchess County BOCES through its regular monthly billing cycle over the 3-year period to commence during the 2018-19 school year.
So moved.
Second.
I just have
Is that-
a question. Is it 2018-19 or 2019-20?
It's,
Are we,
could start this year,
okay,
depending upon the timing of everything.
okay.
More than likely, it might not start till next year.
Okay.
It's gonna be right close. It's either gonna start in June or July, one or the other is
Okay.
about the
If it
time.
moved
Alright,
more
so this
quickly
is-
than it typically moves, they could start billing us towards the end of this year.
Okay, all right, so this just covers. it,
Yes,
if we need to
exact-
change.
that's exactly
Okay,
right.
Okay,
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve a leave request under the Family and Medical Leave Act from Cassie Wintermantle to commence on or about September 4th, 2019, with such leave to be taken as paid medical leave through the period of disability as certified by a physician in writing to the extent of her accrued sick leave, and thereafter such leave to be taken as unpaid medical leave through October 10th, 2019 or thereabouts.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution? Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves the release and settlement agreement concerning student number 2019-1, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the President of the Board of Education to execute such agreement on behalf of the district.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I
This
can't-
is, we've been talking about this for months, and this has been held up by parents who are separated, not both signing the agreement. So we finally got them both to sign off, so we can bring it to you.
Okay. And is there a problem with me voting for this, because you're voting for me to sign it? No. Or no?
No,
Okay.
oh, no, no,
All right,
no, no.
then, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of Amanda Smeeds as a long-term substitute in the position of grade 6 science teacher at the Rhinebeck High School, effective on or around May 28, 2019, through June 26, 2019, at the pleasure of the board. This appointment is to fill the vacancy created by the leave of absence granted to Ashley Wilsey, grade 6 science teacher at the Buckley Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to adopt the following resolution? Whereas the negotiating teams for the district and the Rhinebeck we have to table it.
It's my recommendation.
For the district and the Rhinebeck Administrators Association executed a memorandum of agreement on April 9th, 2019, calling for the creation of a 3-year successor collectively negotiated agreement to the one that expired on June 30th, 2018. And whereas legislative approval is required by the Board of Education in order to implement the funding of said agreement, now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby ratifies the memorandum of agreement between the district and the Rhinebeck Administrators Association, RAA, covering the period from July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2021, and authorizes the funding of those monies necessary to implement the provisions of the 2018-2021 collective negotiated agreement. A copy of the memorandum of agreement shall be incorporated by reference within the minutes of this meeting.
I moved to
Second.
table it.
No, you
You have to
You have to
move
move
it.
it. All right, I
We
moved.
seconded it, and then
Okay.
we moved to table.
So moved.
Second.
I moved to table it.
May I,
Second.
All right, all those in favor of tabling this motion? That's unanimous, that motion
Gets us
passes,
where we
thank
need to
God.
be, yes.
Okay,
21st century version of that. That seems like
yeah, no kidding, no kidding.
Tell Robert
Yeah, I was
to
gonna say, Robert-
revise his rules.
Robert is turning over in his grave.
Exactly. May I have a motion to move into executive session for the purposes of discussing bargaining with one of our units?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes, we're moving into executive session.
Okay.